Hey guys, TJ here at Top Tech Cards and Games. Today I'm going to do a deck profile on Odd Eyes Magicians. It's a much less popular version than just like the Perform Mage, Performapal Magician lists that have been topping a lot and kind of showing up more recently. This deck was kind of expected to do better than it has, I think, but people flocked to the more OTK-oriented Perform Mage list, which is fine. It's a very strong deck. It's got a lot of strong combo plays. This deck's a little slower. It's got a little bit more of a controlled, reserved feel to it. And I think part of the reason it's been doing poorly is people have been playing it just, not playing it wrong, but building it pretty wrong. And I kind of wanted to go over my list, talk about some of the choices I made and some of the choices I think other people have made that aren't very good. So first let's just get into the list and we can talk about what cards are here, what cards aren't here. First we have 3 Performapal Skullcrobat Joker. This card's kind of an auto-include in any deck playing the Magicians, just a level 4 monster, 1800 attack, searches out Pendulum Scale. It also searches out Odd Eyes in this deck, which is extremely relevant. Then 3 Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragons. I guess this is probably one of the reasons that people kind of stay away from this list. Odd Eyes is kind of bricky in its own right, though it does, over the course of an extra turn, fix your bricked hands by putting himself into your extra deck and giving you like an Insight Magician or Wisdom Magician to your hand, which is really good actually if you can manage to survive for a turn. But when you're playing against the Perform Mage list, it's much harder to give yourself an extra turn to survive. But in general, you just kind of need the Odd Eyes as a combo piece, and it's not the worst thing ever if you draw it during slow turns. Let's get into the Magicians now. We got 3 Dragon Pits. This is another one of the issues with the deck, that you're just forced to play triple Dragon Pit because it's a high scale, and you need high scales. Its spin is so bad that I've played Time Gazer a couple times when trying different things because you can run out of high scales in longer games. Luckily, most games don't go that long, and honestly, you could probably get away with only playing 2 Dragon Pits without actually being punished for it at all. But level 7 monsters aren't the worst thing in the world to draw, and I'm trying 3 for right now. Well, not trying 3, I've been playing 3 the whole time. I might try 2 eventually, but if you do that, you need to make sure you can end the game in 2 turns. Because running out of 8s basically makes you can't play the game anymore. Then we have 3 Oath Dragon Magician. Kind of similarly, you need a scale below 3 to really do what this deck wants to do. So Oath Dragon is extremely relevant for his level, his ability, and his scale. His Pendulum effect isn't the greatest thing ever. It puts a Magician from your extra deck back in your hand, but it does let you keep your resources and keep using Dragon Pits and grind your matchups. When summoned, he gets back a Magician from your graveyard to your hand, which is a little bit better since you can get back guys you use for XYZ summons and stuff. And in general, it just kind of lets you keep resources. Being level 6 is super relevant because Naruto is a strong extra card, and Utopia Beyond is one of the most used cards in my extra deck. Then we have 3 Wisdom Eye Magicians. Wisdom Eye kind of just makes the deck work. It puts a free guy into your extra deck work back into your hand with Oath Dragon, but it sets your scales up for you while giving you more cards to summon for free. Just an insanely strong card, obvious 3 of in the deck. Back on things that aren't necessarily like 100% needed in the deck, you don't actually have to play triple Oath Dragon, but you do, again, have to make sure you have enough low scales that you can consistently get something that's lower than 3 scale. And perhaps the split between these and Dragon Pulse might be better. I do play Dragon Pulse, but maybe a second could be better than the pile of Oath Dragons. Next we have 2 Noble Dragon Magicians. Most lists I see people posting only have 1 of this card in it because it is so searchable, but something people tend to miss with this guy is that it's not a once per turn effect. You can special it with its effect multiple times per turn. You can synchro with it multiple times per turn, whether it's off its ability or not. Though this is the card that makes it important that you have a scale lower than 3, because you want to be able to pendulum out your tuners. I've actually played 3 of these a lot of times, and recently I decided that I have enough access to it and I'm tired of drawing 2 of them so often that I wanted to go back down to 2. But it's definitely not bad to play 3 of them. This is a card that really makes your deck go around. Like the big strength of this deck is actually Odd Eyes and Meteor Burst Dragon compared to what the Perform Mage deck does. So I think that it's important to make sure your deck is summoning that card. Then I have 1 Dragon Pulse Magician. This card is not actually used for his scale so much as he is for being the best target that is still an engine piece that we can get with Ebon Illusion Magician. I think his name's Ebon Illusion Magician. The Dark Magician Exceed. 1800 attack with the Ebon is a lot of damage. That's 4300. It gives you a lot of utility for clearing the board. And the level 4 is awkwardly relevant a lot of the time as compared to the, or in comparison to getting like another Dragon Pit. After our Magicians, we have 3 copies of Magispector Kieran and 2 copies of Magispector Raccoon. One thing a lot of people do in this deck that I disagree pretty heavily with is play Apex Avian. Avian is just such a bricky card, it doesn't really help you deal with your opponent's boards ever. And without extra backup, it doesn't stop your opponent from killing you necessarily. Because you'd be so forced to just kind of pull the trigger on it that it's not really like stopping them ever. And you end up in situations where if you don't prematurely negate with the Avian, your opponent just makes like an Ignister, runs it over, and then sets their board up. What Unicorn does is force your opponent to deal with it before they make plays because it's so easy to like sandbag the Unicorn effect. You can just keep sitting on it until your opponent forces you to use it, which means they kind of have to commit into the Unicorn, and it's basically guaranteed to end up back in your hand. The other reason I like these guys more than something like Avian is because they let you get scales. It's possible to play the game with a 5 scale if you just put Raccoon into your scales, and it's possible to use the Unicorn as a 2 scale. You just give up your Magician effects in the Pendulum, which is just fine. It doesn't really seem like I'm losing too much by doing that, and I'm more than happy to make that trade-off. Raccoon also gives you access to Totem Bird, a card to help you protect your board, which is really sweet, and it's just a ton of value off of your Pendulum summons. Then we have a couple utility cards, 3 Damage Jugglers, a Hat Tricker, and a Trick Clown. The Trick Clown might be better off as a second Hat Tricker. I've kicked that around with a couple friends, not sure which one's better, but I'm just keeping the utility of having every option right now. These cards are key to help you play around Floodgates in the sense of making rank 4s with these guys, and blanking your opponent's Wavering Eyes and stopping OTKs with these guys. And then we have 2 copies of Maxi. I don't love Maxi in here. I'm not playing 3 because this is such a combo-based deck and drawing multiples is kind of a death sentence. Even just drawing the 1 can be too bricky a lot of the times. But this deck is much slower than the Performage list, and if your opponent is trying to go off and you have a Maxi with a Kieran in play, it's very easy to stop them from killing you, and if they're not super aware of what they can do and what you can do, they might give you enough cards that you just blow them out. Under the spells, we have 3 copies of Upstart Goblin. Like I said, it's a very combo-based deck. Not a ton of cards in here that aren't in here that I would like to have in here, so the Upstarts are just kind of a shoo-in. 3 Wavering Eyes. The format is so based around Pendulum decks right now that I think Waver is too good to pass up on. It is a shame that it gets blanked by Pendulum Call, which we are also playing 3 copies of. But I think that's just the way the cookie crumbles. You have to play the Wavering Eyes. If your opponent doesn't kill you, it'll help you blow them out and get your board back. And 3 Pendulum Call, because it sets up so many of your plays. You don't have to search your scales with it necessarily. You can search like a scale and a Noble Dragon, which is really important to remember. So you can search Noble Dragon with this and still combo off. Finally, I play 1 copy of Sky Iris without any copies of the Fusion Spell. The Fusion Spell is another mistake that I think a lot of people are making with the deck. Because it's actually just a bricky card. This deck's not bad at clearing your opponent's board. Once your opponent sets up, you don't really have any issues dealing with their cards. Meteor Bursts and stuff are all so efficient that it's easy to make their cards go away. The issue sometimes is finding combo cards. But when you're playing a bunch of Sky Iris and a bunch of Fusion Spells, those cards aren't really helping. Sometimes the biggest issue is actually setting up your own board when your opponent doesn't have a board for you to break, or when they've kind of retained resources. And that's the part of the game that I don't think you can afford to struggle with. If you can't proactively set up your own board without burning too many resources, or if you can't proactively like just make a play if your opponent's like retained resources, if the only way your deck is winning is by getting rid of your opponent's board, that doesn't seem like a good place to be. And I think that what playing a bunch of Sky Iris and Fusion Spells and stuff does to your deck is force you into that role. And I don't want my deck to do that. I did want more access to Odd Eyes, and this card has a lot of awkward game to it. So I thought 1 copy was worth it, plus the protection effect is neat. Definitely not a necessary slot even in my eyes, but I do like it. Notable cards that aren't in here are like Foolish Burial, No Arch Phoenix Centrix. Foolish is a card that I thought about because it gives you access to your Clowns, as well as Noble Dragon, which is really cool, but initially when I played it, it just seemed better as another Noble Dragon because I really didn't want to Foolish Burial my Clowns almost ever. But it is something that I'm going to try again. I'm not 100% sure that it's not ideal. Another thing is like Oath Dragon is super bricky, but Dragon Pulse is like not much better. You could definitely consider going a 2-2 split on these guys, but when we talk about the extra deck, I think it'll be a little more clear why I don't like that. I mean, I've already mentioned Naruto and Utopia Beyond is the reason, I guess, so I can just talk about those a little bit. Let's just go over the extra deck, actually, then we can talk about some more of the reasons for card choices. First off, we have 2 Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon. Meteor Burst is the reason I think that this deck has a real reason to be played over the other variants of the deck or other decks in general. Meteor Burst is just such a blowout against so many decks in the format. Like against Cosmo, you can kill their ships and they don't get anything for it when you have this guy in play. He just makes rank 7s and stuff, or rank whatevers, on his own by being so freaking efficient. And he doesn't let your opponent stop you from OTKing you. So, just a really good card. One Clearwing Synchro Dragon, just another card that's pretty good at protecting your board. Definitely not like a staple in the deck, but it's been pretty good for me so far, and I wanted to make sure I had enough level 7 synchros that I could keep making them, so my Noble Dragons wouldn't really be wasted. Then we have one Michael, the Arch Lightsworn. Michael isn't incredible in the deck. You play enough light monsters, though, between your Clowns and Wisdom Eye Magician, that he's pretty easy to make, and the utility he has for clearing just any problem just removing from play is so good, and you can't really find it in any other card. So it's just another thing that I wanted to include. Under rank 7s, we have Ebon Illusion Magician. One of the coolest things about this card is that you can level him up basically from a rank 6 Spellcaster Exceed also. So you can overlay him over Narito to get him without having to use 2 level 7s. He lets you special summon a normal Spellcaster from your hand or deck though, and in this deck that's going to be Dragon Pulse Magician 99% of the time. Occasionally you'll want an extra 7 to play with, but normally it's Dragon Pulse Magician. And then when a normal Spellcaster attacks, you get to banish a card on your opponent's board. So between like these two cards, actually, it's very easy to remove a bunch of your opponent's cards, even if they're not able to be destroyed. Like for instance, Pendulums that your opponent got off Pendulum Call. And just in general, this plus the Dragon Pulse is 4,300 damage, which is a ton. We also play Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon without anything that it really gets back, but Flare Metal creates a game state where your opponent can't really play cards if you've cleared their Pendulum Scales and stuff. It'll make it so hard for them to actually set up their board again. And sometimes you can do like, 7-some thousand, 8-some thousand if you played an upstart, but you can't actually kill them. But you can make a Flare Metal afterwards after your opponent, wasn't able to play hand traps because of your Meteor Burst in your battle phase. And then they just can't actually play cards and you win the game. We also have one copy of Big Eye. Big Eye is just such a strong effect. It's so good to have the utility of being able to still remove your opponent's monsters on a rank 7. Then one Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. Absolute's one of the better cards in the deck as well. It lets you make free plays, basically. Like you can negate the attack of one of your smaller guys to get back a Meteor Burst, and then your opponent still isn't able to play their hand traps during your battle phase, even though you use the Meteor Burst effect and, made a rank 7 with it, like this one. For instance, you detach, negate one of your other monster effects. I'm saying horrifying amount, oh god. And then you have a billion damage in play. That's 5,300 right there, and it's not a super high commitment play. For rank 6s, like I said, we have Narito and Utopia Beyond. Narito is important, I think. One, for protecting a board, you can set up a board and then make Narito after you've cleared your opponent's scales. In that situation, now you get to negate both of their scales unless they can deal with the Narito through their monsters, which is really, really powerful in this format. But I think the other key thing is that it can turn your unicorns and stuff into Illusion Magician, which represents even more damage in a lot of situations, or a way to clear a card off of your opponent's board. And I think that's really strong. Utopia Beyond is another just incredibly important card in the deck. It's 3,000 attack, makes sure all your opponent's monsters 0. When used in conjunction with Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, that's 8,000 damage already if your opponent just has a face-up attack position monster. Since you put the guy down to 0, Odd Eyes attacks it. Odd Eyes does double damage when it attacks monsters, so that's 5,000 right there. And then the Utopia Beyond is an extra 3,000 to the face. So it just creates such swingy games, and I think that it's an incredibly powerful card in your extra deck, which is the reason I'm using so many Oath Dragons. But I'm not sure that the brickiness of Oath Dragon outweighs that, and I'm not sure that I even need 3 Oath Dragons to consistently make these cards. So maybe it's better to just play 2 Oath Dragons and 2 Dragon Pulses, so I have more level 4s to make basic plays with, kind of control the board in the games where I draw bricky, as well as have an extra target for my Ebon Illusion Magician so that I'm not kind of screwed if I have to put my Dragon Pulse into my Pendulum Zones. And that's something that I just have to mess with more to get the right answer to. Then we have one Performance Trapeze Magician, just a ton of damage. Direwolf and Castell, just utility cards to deal with what my opponent puts on the board. One copy of Totem Bird to make use of those Magispector Raccoons that I'm playing. This card has been actually extremely key in a lot of wins I've had with this list. Because when you summon Raccoon, if the game drags on for a little while, and like I said, this is a much slower deck than the Perform Mage deck, you will get both your Raccoons, and then once you get to a point in the game where you can push for lethal or just need to protect your board, you'll have the Totem Bird there to make. Then finally we have one copy of Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon. This is in the deck so that we have guaranteed access to it whenever we kill our Absolute. It's just too good to pass up. You don't want to not have a copy in your extra deck. Even though we're not playing the fusion spell, your access to Absolute is pretty easy, so you want to make sure it's there, just so you can make it. Hi, cat. Boy. Just so you can make it and guarantee that you have a way to bounce your opponent's monsters and set up a board that your opponent can't really deal with. It's almost more key that it's sitting in your extra deck than to have it in play, though, because it makes your Absolute hard to kill. Anytime your opponent would send your Absolute to the graveyard, you're going to end up with a 3000 defense Vortex in play, bouncing one of their monsters, and then a card that can negate their spells and traps. So it's just another card that creates really hard to deal with boards, and that was one of the things the deck was lacking. So even though you don't play the fusion spell, I think that Vortex is too good to pass up on. One card that's not in my extra deck that I kick around a lot, it goes in and out, cycles in with kind of in between Michael, sometimes like Flare, those types of cards, is Gaga Cowboy. Cowboy is just terrible. It's not a good card. I hate playing it, but a lot of times it's kind of necessary because your deck can't quite deal the damage it needs to. And a lot of times this is one of those decks, like I said, for the reason I'm playing Flare, basically. And when you play the Ebon Illusion Magician for Dragon Pulse, it's pretty easy to get 2 level 4s in play after you make your play. It wasn't so easy before I started playing Ebon into Dragon Pulse a lot more often. Once I realized how strong that was, that play started coming up much more often. And that might be another card that could help you bring your clock up to the speed of other decks. And if you do that, I think it's worth definitely considering a second Dragon Pulse Magician so you can have access to those types of plays more often. Same with the Trapeze Magician. In all honesty, like, double Dragon Pulse is very good. You could cut something else. You could not play Maxis. I kind of hate Max in here, but I did want to try it. I keep coming back to it as a consideration. It's not a great card by any stretch, and I don't like cards that I can't combo with in any way at all, but it hasn't been too bad. When backed up with a Kieran in play, it's just so good that I keep putting it back in. Other than that, I do think that people are making a big mistake when they play cards like Apex Avion, just big, goofy bricks. Yes, they are blowouts. I think that people are making a mistake when I see cards like Solemn Warning and Vanity in the deck. Yeah, I know that they're really good traps to use against the other Pendulum decks, but your opponent is going to have Dragon Fit Magician also. And when they have Dragon Fit Magician, it means they can just clear your stuff. If your back row doesn't survive, then why does it matter? You know, it's not worth simplifying the game state to set a card and have your opponent go, well, discard a Pendulum, because what if they're discarding Noble Dragons? What if they're discarding cards they didn't need to combo? I would rather not have cards that can brick me up like that in my deck that are that easy for my opponent to deal with. You know, that's the difference between hand traps and those cards. You can hold on to the hand traps, and your opponent has to go really far out of their way to make them dead. They're going to play Dragon Pit Magician either way. Their plan is to put that card in their Pendulum Zone. And once it's in their Pendulum Zone, your trap cards are just instantly bad unless you play a bunch of them. So if you want to play traps in your deck, you want to make sure you're playing a deck with a bunch of traps so that your opponent can't just snipe them, can't just pick one, because, I mean, obviously you only have a couple traps in those situations. So I think that's something really key to think about when you're building your decks. Even when you're playing these decks that aren't going to play many traps, you want to make sure you either play none, I think, or a bunch. But that's really all I have to say about this deck for right now. I'm not sure that this is as good as the more aggressive performance-based deck, and I can do a video on that too if you guys are interested. But I think this version is a lot more fun, it's a lot cooler, and it's a decent amount cheaper since you don't play Luster Pendulums in it or Ignister in the extra deck. One of the big issues I have with this list actually was my lack of Ignister access. So cards I've considered playing to fix that are putting like a copy of Gigabyte in, and then a copy of Mask Chameleon, and a copy of King of Fairlamps, along with an Ignister in my extra deck. And I didn't hate that when I tried it. It was okay. Gigabyte is pretty bricky. Sometimes it's really good when you just need to make a rank 4 and that's able to like deal with your opponent's floodgates or something. So it's not the worst thing ever. Drawing Mask Chameleon is fine most of the time, so that's not the end of the world. And Ignister is extremely good. So definitely something to consider if you're looking for ways to change the deck up. But, you know, other than that, I don't think there's a ton that you really have to change with this deck. I do love it. It's a lot of fun to play. It's much more fun than the Performance deck because you're making such goofy plays with such goofy cards like Odd Eyes and stuff. So, you know, if you guys have any questions about playing the deck, maybe combos, stuff like that, let me know down below. I'm more than happy to talk to you guys about it. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel for plenty more Yu-Gi-Oh! Content coming soon. And, you know, hope you guys have a lot of fun with this deck. Hope you guys took something away from this. Thanks for watching.